Online, Maritake Sangyo. That's the Japanese name of the company.
Iron Mountain Armory.
What?
Iron Mountain Armory.
Oh, okay.
I've got an original set.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I went to a lot of concerts in the 80s, and plus I'm in love with my own voice. I don't listen to anybody else.
I have an inherited set.
Of armor?
Yeah, from the 1600s.
Nice.
I have, okay, so basic story is, my great-grandfather was technically a samurai, but because of the imperial dogma of Japan before World War II, they immigrated to the United States and brought almost everything they could. And basically lived here since then. And now we have like.
And you have all this stuff.
Yeah.
All right, number one, that's really cool. And number two, you suck. just so we're clear. But you see, now it's 2:06, but 4 more people came in while I was doing my little Jeff Dunham impression. See? Where did I leave Jillian? My wife is not here this weekend because I brought my girlfriend instead. No. Did you see the eye roll? It's almost like we could be dating. No, Jillian had to work this weekend. She has a real job. Well, by real job, my wife installs security systems for police departments and fire departments and courthouses and stuff. So she does, not only does she do the physical installation, but she's the one that does all the programming for them. And there's not a lot of people that do that, and she's really good at it, so her services have gotten more and more in demand in the last 2 years. And we've almost reached a point where I'm going to be a trophy husband. At least that's my goal. I'm pretty sure it's not hers. Her goal is probably, if I'm going to get a trophy husband, it's going to look more like Brad Pitt and less like Ryan Stiles or Colin Mockery. That's the one I get all the time.
Colin's funny.
I have Ryan's shoe size, but Colin's hair, so that's always the, you're really funny, do you know who you remind me of? I'm like, if you say Colin Mockery, you lose a limb. Like, no, you remind me of that guy on Who's Line. And I'm like, Wayne Brady, I get that all the time. People are like, what? No. It's obvious I'm not Wayne Brady, I can't sing. I wish I could. No, you don't want me to sing. There's a reason why I'm heavily armed. When I got into weapons combat is because I have a big mouth, no filter, and I run really slow. I got beat up a lot in school. I did. I was this skinny, weak kid. I still am, but worse then. Look, you think I'm skinny now. I'm 6'7", I weigh 246 pounds as of last Thursday. When I graduated high school, I was this height and I weighed 173 pounds. I hit my growth spurt in 8th grade. I went from 5'8" to 6'3.5" during my 9th grade school year. My parents couldn't even come close to keeping me in pants. If anybody remembers capri pants, you're welcome. I invented those by accident. At mine, we called them floods. When you wore pants that were too short. But I only gained 8 pounds. I went from 5'8", 125, which is skinny enough, to 6'3.5", 133 pounds. I looked like a death camp survivor. Actually, I looked like one of the death camp people who didn't survive. So yeah, martial arts is a fun. This panel is called Real Sword or Piece of Crap, also known as the Idiot's Guide to Sword Buying. And most conventions won't let me use that title because we're an anime con, and you can't call someone idiots. We have enough problems with self-image. So it's okay to have the Idiot's Guide to everything else, but not the Idiot's Guide to Sword Buying. And honestly, there are conventions that don't want me to do the panel, Real Sword or Piece of Crap, because people are afraid that sword vendors are going to be offended by the panel, because I teach samurai stuff for a living. I normally travel with a 700-year-old blade that's worth 40,000. You've seen it. I didn't bring it this weekend. It's at home keeping my wife company. Because you know how it is. You're married. It's your sword when she says it's yours. The rest of the time it's with her. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what makes a sword a real weapon versus something, something that'll get you through the zombie apocalypse versus the sword that will not get you all the way through the zombie apocalypse, but it will take out your roommate if they start foaming. Okay? But it's not really durable. And the honest truth is, sword vendors love this panel because they sell decoration swords. $20 and they look cool and they're awesome and there's nothing wrong with them. I have a couple myself. But then they have real swords that cost a lot more. And you come to this panel and you learn 5 major points to be able to tell the difference between a decoration and a real sword. And then you go down to the dealer room and spend more money than you were planning on, and they love that. So the only sword vendors that have ever had a problem with me doing this panel are the guys who are honestly trying to rip you off. And my first time, has anybody been to Anime Central in Chicago or even heard of it? ASIN they run 33,000 for their anime convention. And the first year I was there was a guy selling swords. He had no idea who I was. It was my first year there, and I wasn't dressed out. I was just in normal street clothes. He was selling a master sword for $12,000. And what his hook was, is he would try to show you this $12,000 blade. It's made by a sword master, a master smith, which is a made-up term. And then what he'd do is he'd say, okay, look, I can tell by the look on your face, you didn't come to this convention looking to spend $12,000, even though it's worth it. Master swordsmith. I want to show you this blade instead. This one's only $600. It was made by the same guy, and I'll bet you can't even tell the difference. And there's a reason why you couldn't tell the difference. They were the same blade. You put a different handguard on it. That's it. Okay? And I know the company he was getting his swords from. They're mass produced in Korea, and if you buy them in bulk, they're $35 a piece. And what he did is he was putting $17.50 Subas, that's the handguard, from another company that was doing knockoffs from, and he'd swap out the Subas. And I was gonna just walk by because that's not my business. I'm not a vendor, I'm a performer, so I was gonna walk by. And the guy called me out while I was walking by. You, come here. I'll bet you can't tell the difference. I'm like, please leave me out of this. And he's like, no, I want you to look at this blade. I'll bet you can't tell the difference between the two. If you push me long enough, I will get offended by things because they do have an ego. My wife hasn't beaten it out of me completely yet. And he's like, well, I'll bet you can't tell the difference. I'm like, actually, sir, I can, but please leave me alone. Went to walk on. And I didn't need to say that. I'm trying to walk away, but really I gave you a way to say something so I can make an idiot out of you. And he's like, no, you can't. These were made by the same master smith. I said, first of all, Japanese swordsmiths do not call themselves master smiths, and those blades are made in Korea, not Japan. And I know what they cost, so don't go there. He blew up, he got angry at me, he went to the guy running the dealer room and tried to get me kicked out of the convention. And then he started a smear campaign saying that Samurai Dan was made up, and he's not legit. Which is really funny because I know that guy. He's from Florida, and his martial arts background was made up. And he ended up getting kicked out of the convention. Like, no, you idiot, I do this for a living. I know those blades, and pulled them up online, said, here's your distributor. Here's where you get the Suba. And this is the shoelace material you use to wrap the handles instead of actual silk Ito. Because silk Ito runs about $8 a foot. And if you have a sword with a 9-inch handle, it takes 13 feet of Ito to wrap your blade. The rule of thumb is you convert the inches to feet and add 4. And that's how much cord you need to wrap a sword traditionally. But if you get it's like hockey shoelaces, that material, you can buy it on a spool where it works out to be about 8 cents a foot. So most of the lesser blades, and that includes this one when we look at it, you can see the material. It's a lot cheaper to wrap the handles. But anyway, this is me just bragging about getting a guy kicked out of a convention. And I didn't want to. Well, you remember the Con Horror Stories thing last night where they were talking about bad conventions? This guy bought a convention in Colorado, invited some of the guests, and Kiba, I don't know if he was a guest there, but his buddy Steve Nunez that he talked about was. And the convention did the same thing. They didn't pay the hotel. And when you rent a room in a hotel, is anybody staying here? Did anybody rent a room? Okay. When you paid for your room, they also ran your card for incidentals. Yeah. Most of the time, what guests try to do is have them just block incidentals because the convention pays for my hotel room, and I'm not giving them my card because of this problem. This guy's hotel, this guy's convention, not only did he not pay for his, pay for the convention space, he didn't pay for the guest rooms either. The hotel doesn't care where the money comes from, so what they did is they charged the room to the guest's credit card. So the guests, not only did they not get paid, they had $400 worth of charges because that was their hotel room thing. And same guy. Harry, you can be crooked in more than one job. But this panel, real sword or piece of crap, swords fall into 3 different categories. Category number 1 is a decoration. Nothing wrong with that. It's the end of the con, it's Sunday afternoon, you got 20 bucks left burning a hole in your pocket, and you go hit the dealer room that one last time because you want a souvenir from Anime Wichita. Something that you can look at years down the road and say, hey, I at least had fun that weekend. You know, when you have a kid and they cry. That's just Spider-Man. He's just worried that his premiere's not going to go as well as expected. You want a souvenir, so you go to the dealer room, and it comes down to there's this really cool shiny sword or another Pikachu pillow. And honestly, you have 5 already. Getting a 6th one is not going to increase your chances of getting meeting a nice person. Yeah, we're going to leave Molly out of this. She's very pretty, but the fact that she just blew me off for 3 years now, I'm mostly, see, she's my favorite. So, decoration. They're inexpensive, they look really cool, and they increase your badass factor. Because when your friends come over to your room, and in the midst of the Pikachu pillows, and the Sebastian body pillow that you sleep with and don't want to admit to, the girls are all going, that's not me. Yeah, it is. And the fangirls that just love J. Michael Tatum. Tatum is awesome, but spoiler alert for the girls who keep chasing him and sending him their underwear in the mail. He's out of the closet. And very out. Anyway, hi, don't mind me. We went totally sideways. Where are you going? Go ahead. You've already interrupted my panel. Keep going. Go! Take the projector. I don't need it. I brought my own props. Decoration sword. Second category is a collectible. And I don't mean, in this country, those kind of end up being the same thing. What I mean here is an investment. Japanese swords used to be a really safe thing to buy because their value always appreciated. If you bought a World War II blade, our guy whose samurai family settled here left already. But a lot of people were in World War II and brought back blades at the end of the war. Those swords are worth 10 times what they were in the 50s. Actually, they're worth about 3 times what they were just 20 years ago. Buying a Japanese sword used to be a really safe investment. Something you buy, you find, you pay $1,000 for, and you figure in 10 years it's worth $5,000. In 2008, the Japanese economy tanked, their stock market crashed, and when that happened, a lot of Japanese businessmen who had huge collections of swords to raise ready cash, to raise capital, they sold off a bunch of those blades, and it kind of flooded the market. And so the values on those swords kind of dropped, where you could pick up a $10,000 blade for $4 grand. I have one at home that my instructor got for me and told me I had to have it. So I took it. My instructor said so. And I'm more afraid of him than I am my wife. It's close. But she's afraid of him too. And determining the value on an investment like that is really difficult because it depends on what school it is, what year it was made, its history. Strangely enough, blades are worth more if they've killed someone. So I'm looking to increase the value on a couple of my swords, so keep talking. That's because you sat up front. You need to be wearing a red shirt. If you're in a red shirt, you'd be out before the first commercial break. Actually, you wore a red shirt, but you're sitting behind him. You're safe for a while. And honestly, the features that make up a valuable collectible sword are still the same as the swords in our third category, and that's a usable sword. The Japanese term is shinken, or real sword. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over 5 points that will help you determine whether the blade you're picking up is a decoration sword or a real sword. This is an easy lecture. By the time we're done, you'll all know all 5 points. I know it's an easy lecture because it's my lecture. If it was complicated, I couldn't do it. Don't laugh when I say that. That was me just trying to make you feel better. So if you struggle to get 3 of the points, you're still ahead of the curve. Decoration swords. Has anybody seen, if you buy a sword as a decoration, there is nothing wrong with that. But for the love of God, use it for its intended purposes. If it's a decoration sword that's meant to hang on a wall and look really cool, put it on the wall. Leave it standing in the corner of your room because, again, it makes you look cooler when your friends come over. It's like, what's that? That's my blade. In case the zombie apocalypse breaks out. I've seen The Walking Dead. But if it's a decoration sword, use it for what it was intended for. Has anybody seen the QVC Shop at Home Network? It's a cable TV show. Okay, almost everybody, you're not going to admit to it, but you've surfed past it. It's like, oh, look, they're selling Penguin ceramic salt shakers. Great. I'll come back to it later. There might be a rerun of Matlock or something. The QVC, 5 or 6 years ago, they were selling a set of swords. There were 3 of them. And I don't remember what they were selling them for on QVC, but you can get them through the Bud K catalog as a closeout for $19.99. If you can buy 3 swords and a sword rack for $19.99, you should know you're getting decorations, not battle-ready blades. But guy was selling the swords, and again, I remember the blades. They were, they had black wrap on them, and the saya was also wrapped in black and painted red underneath, but all 3 blades. The guy had the katana kake, the sword rack at the table, had the wakizashi and the tanzo, the short sword and the dagger, still there, but he'd drawn the long sword out, put the saya back down, and he was holding the sword to show it off. Honest to God, he took the blade and started slapping the flat of the blade on the table to demonstrate how strong the sword was. This is a decoration set, folks. If you don't do things like that because Murphy is always watching. And his college roommate Darwin is up there going, we're getting him out. Guy's smacking the sword on the table. And this video is still online on YouTube. You can find it because QVC keeps taking it down and some jerk sword instructor in the Midwest keeps throwing it up from various mobile hotspots. It's cute that you guys think I have that kind of technical skill. I have my wife do it. Guy's got the sword blade and he's smacking it on the table and he says, now the best thing about this sword blade is its durability. And Murphy strikes. The blade snapped off right near the handle, flipped up and caught him just inside the shoulder in the upper pectoral. QVC is a recorded program, but it's filmed live. Guy drops behind the table, but you can still hear him because he's mic'd. He's like, oh yeah, that got me good. And some other guy come running over to cover, comes up behind the table, looks at the camera, looks down at the guy on the floor, looks back at the camera, and then says, well, it looks like we'll be having an ambulance today on the QVC. If you're gonna buy a decoration, why in the world are you smacking it on the table? If you move out of your house and go to get your first apartment, and you wanna put a painting on the wall to make your apartment look cooler, if you go to an art gallery, and the guy running the art gallery is demonstrating the virtues of the painting by smacking it on the table, you should walk away. Now the best thing about the Mona Lisa is she can take a pounding. This is... And this is why she's smiling. If you buy a painting, use it for its purposes. It's a decoration. And we've all seen those kids that take the sword and their parents' 2x4s and go out in the backyard with a friend with a video camera. That's our... If you do that with a decoration, you deserve the 15 minutes of infamy you're gonna get. And those footages thrown up on YouTube, you can always tell that it's their best friend that's recording them because when the blade breaks and they get hit and they fall down, they're still recording. But it's shaking because their friend is laughing so hard. I like you. Grateful. It's like you've had kids. Because your sympathy level for it goes down when you have your own children. Because it's different if you warn them. If you tell them, don't touch the stove, it's hot. If they go, hot, and touch it, ah, you're like, what did I just say? But if you don't warn them, then you have sympathy. Oh, you burnt your finger, let me fix it. And I have 2 kids, and my daughter was a really slow learner. So my sympathy level for training injuries has dropped down to almost nothing. Like, get back up, put your eyeballs back in your head. I told you to block higher. It's on you, that dental heel. Just part your hair that way. Decoration swords. Again, nothing wrong with them. Just use them for the reason they were made. They belong on the wall to look cool. If you want a real sword, there are things to look for. And so here's where we start. Real sword or piece of crap? And I brought examples. I'll show them to you as we go. But the first thing you're going to do if you want to know if a sword is a real sword going to get you through the zombie apocalypse, or again, just take out your roommate. Because even a decoration will work once. It worked on the guy for QVC. You're going to take the sword, draw it out.
Dude, did you leave my trophy?
Yay, shiny.
No, I locked it.
Take the cool part and set it down. I know, I lost you on that part, didn't I? I'm like this burlesque dancer, it's all tease. I'll show you what I want, what you want, and then I'm going to take it away. Put the shiny thing away. Not that I know anything about burlesque at all. It just makes me uncomfortable. It scares me. And I have a convention in 2 weeks in Memphis, Tennessee. The Anime Blues. It's a great convention. If you guys travel at all, Anime Blues is an awesome con, but it's very adult themed. On Saturday night, they don't have a rave in main events. They have a full-on strip show. They bring in exotic dancers and install the pole. Anime Blues. And the first time I was there, I did not know any of that. And the VIP meet and greet thing they had Friday afternoon, I was emceeing it, and so the guests and the VIPs are all sitting around talking and nothing's getting done, so I stepped up to the podium and kind of knocked on it and said, I'd like to call this meeting of Sex Addicts Anonymous to order. To be funny, and everybody laughed, and this group of girls in the back went, and immediately went over and sat with my wife and just started talking to her and chatting about. And I got done talking and brought up Eric Stewart, one of the voice actors, so he could talk. And I would sit down, and the girls were like, "You're so awesome. We're going to come to all of your events, but you have to come to ours." I'm like, "Well, sure, of course, yeah. I'm a guy. I read anything. I'm pretty girls. So, yeah. What do you want? I can cut my arm off. You can buy. I'm not using it." I'm like, "Yeah, we'll come to all your events. That's great." And my wife's going. I'm like, "Why? What are you cosplay guests?" And they're like, "No, we don't actually put clothes on." And I'm like, "Okay, what are you here for?" And they're like, no, one girl goes, "We're the strippers." I'm like, "Yeah, that's funny. No, seriously, are you voice actors I haven't met yet?" She's like, "No, we're the show for the strip on Saturday night. You promised you were going to come." They saved me a seat in the front row. And so when I did come in, because I promised, I tried to sit in the back with the guy with the spotlight, and the girls saw me and marched me down front. And said, not only am I bald, but I blush easily, and I blush all the way down my arms. It was, yes, it starts here and works down. Well, it kind of starts here and just works. It was horrifying, but it's a great convention. It's just scary because it's a huge con. The convention center is gigantic, so even though the con runs 6,000, it doesn't sell out. So they use half of it for Anime Blues and half of it for other purposes. And that same year, I'm not lying, honest, I'm a stage performer, which means I'm like a politician. I'll bend the truth to where you don't recognize it anymore. But this part's true. They had the Anime Blues on one side of the strip show, and on the other side of the convention hall, you had to use the same hallway for access to get there. Gospel quartet auditions. 50, 60, 70-year-old people dressed in the 50s skirts and suits and everything. And we're all sharing the walkways and splitting off. And so they're standing, waiting for their turn to audition, singing, screaming at the kids that you're all going to hell. And all the anime kids decked out screaming back, "I'll see your mom there." It was awful. I mean, it was funny, but it was awful. So, real sword or piece of crap. Draw out the shiny part and set it aside. The first thing you're going to look at is this, the sheath, the scabbard. In Japanese, the term is saya. I want you to look at the inside. Outside doesn't matter as much. When you look at the inside, if it was made for a shinken, an actual real sword, the inside of the scabbard is going to be made out of wood. Always. If it's made out of metal or ABS plastic, the scabbard was made for a decoration sword, okay? That doesn't mean that you stop your search, because obviously this doesn't have to belong to the blade. And that's a common thing at conventions with sword vendors who sell semi-expensive blades and decorations, is to try to distract the people. I'm giving you guys bad ideas. Distracting the merchant, and somebody will take an actual $600 blade, draw it out, and shove it into a decoration sword scabbard and try to go up and pay 20 bucks for it. So it doesn't mean that it's game over, but it's the first thing to look for and the easiest. Look at the scabbard. The inside's going to be made out of wood. We're in Wichita, Kansas. You guys should know what wood looks like. I did this lecture in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, and some teenage boy raised his hand and said, "How can you tell if it's wood?" Now see, we're going to laugh, and I laughed too. And I started to make a snarky comment and tease him, and then I realized I'd talked to this kid before. He lived downtown in Pittsburgh. The only grass he ever sees is his baseball field. And the only wood he ever sees is the fake wood moldings and stuff in his apartment. And it's hard to tell. So I showed him a couple things, but you guys understand the difference between wood and ABS plastic. And the reason is this: Japanese swords, any swords, when you draw them out quickly, if your technique isn't perfect, you're going to put pressure against the top of this with the sharp part. And when you draw it out, if it's made out of metal, it's going to damage the blade. Also, if you go to twist the sword because you're trying to make a draw because your life depends on it, this giant cookie monster thing came jumping down at you. I have weird dreams, don't judge me. And you twist the blade, that metal scabbard's going to damage the blade. And ABS plastic will dull a blade faster than almost anything. In addition to that, if you do take swords out and play with them, you've seen videos online where people will take 2-liter bottles full of water and cut them with swords. The first couple times you do that, razor sharp, right through, and by the third cut, when you hit it, it'll cut into it, and then the bottle just kind of explodes. Looks good, but it's all torn up and it doesn't slice through. The reason for that is ABS plastic puts a really fine coating of plastic right along the edge where it hit, and so it dulls your blade up like that. And in a life or death situation, that's a big deal. So nobody uses ABS plastic because it dulls up the blade and it coats the blade as well. So it's not something safe to house the sword in, okay? So real sword or piece of crap? Number one, wooden sheath. Check the inside. If it's made out of wood, you're on a roll. If it's not the end of the world, because there's other things to look for, because you can just stick real blade in, but it's something to watch, okay? All right, step number 2. Real sword or piece of crap? Now we get to pick up this part. Well, before you get looking at the shiny part, we're not going to look at that part yet. What I want you to do for step number 2, you're going to take the handle off, or better yet, have the person selling the sword take the handle off. And if you walk up to a sword vendor and say, "Hey, can you take the handle off this blade?" If they go, "We don't do that. The handle wasn't meant to be taken off." Walk away. Okay, that's like shopping for a used car and going to the dealership. You walk out on the lot and say, "Hey, I kind of like this old Mustang here. Can you pop the hood?" Don't do that. We don't open the hood. You're going to buy that car. You don't know if there's an engine in there or a squirrel cage. With or without squirrel.
Or both.
Like, no, pop the hood. And actually, when I was shopping for my son's first car, I had a dealer do that with an old Mustang. He wouldn't pop the hood. It's like, pop the hood anyway. It looked like rats had been living in there for years. There was no battery. The air filter was gone. And it's like, no, I don't think so. Japanese swords, this was the sidearm for the samurai warriors. Big guy sitting in the back. This might be his. You'll have to come take it from me. It's mine now. They were designed to be serviced. They needed, for basic maintenance, samurai had to make sure it was safe to use. So it was designed to be taken apart. The modern equivalent for our military is a sidearm, just a handgun. And they were made to be taken apart. You can field strip a Glock in 8 seconds with your eyes closed. Don't ask, I have a lot of free time. But they're made to be taken apart so you can perform basic maintenance, make sure they work, and put them back together. In a Japanese sword, the handle is held on by one pin, called a makugi, runs through the blade. Some of them will have two. Okay, every once in a while we get a modern sword vendor that will think if one's good and two is better, three must be great. And they'll just start drilling holes in it and filling them all up. And three is actually counterproductive because of the vibration qualities when you hit things. One works great, two is okay too as well, but it has a pin through it. This is an older World War II blade, remounted, 1943 blade. Has one pin. Usually you have a cleaning kit that has a brass hammer in it that you use to take the sword apart. They use a little brass hammer because the metal is soft enough that it'll bend before you damage your blade if it's not working right, and that little top piece comes off. And you use it to take the pin out. Been doing this for a long time. Pin. And then you make a fist grip so that your whole hand is pressing against the tsuba. If anybody was in the samurai sword class last night, I explained that's not how you hold the sword. You do a little bit of a pistol grip like that. But to take it apart, you do this, and then strike the back of your hand and let that vibration work for you. Did you hear it? Ta-da! Wasn't that complicated. So, step number 2, ask him to take the handle off. Take the really cool part and set it aside again. Killing you with that, aren't I?
Yes.
You're welcome. Step number 2, I want you to look at the handle, suka. Step number 1, the scabbard is going to be made out of wood. That's the inside. I know if we have anybody who's a World War II buff, if you've seen World War II Japanese army officer swords, the scabbards are green, and they're actually metal on the outside, but they've got a wooden sleeve on the inside. Imaginatively enough, those World War II blades were called gunto, which translates as war sword. So, but it's metal on the outside with a wooden sleeve on the inside. Step number 2, though, you're going to take the handle off. Don't bother about the metal cap. The Fuchi and Kashira both come off. But I want you to look at the inside. The inside of the handle is also going to be made out of wood. Okay? If it was made in Japan, they use a Japanese hardwood called ho wood. You can snicker all you want, but it's just, of course you would. But it's made out of wood. And the reason for that is, when you swing the sword, again, when you hit something solid, there's shock and vibration that travels down. And if the handle's made out of metal, it doesn't absorb any of the vibration at all. You remember Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner cartoons? Wham! That's gonna happen. And if it's made out of ABS plastic or ivory, some of the really expensive commemorative pieces have ivory handles. Those are gonna crack and break under duress. When you hit things hard, bang, bang, by the time you're done, the handle splits. And inexpensive metal handles will do that too. Remember I said I have some decoration blades? They made a Highlander 3 sword. And it was awesome. It was the bad guy's sword. So it was a demon with folded wings on it. It was really cool. It had good balance and everything. So I used to use it a little bit for forms when students weren't watching. Because then when I encourage them to spend $79.99 on a fake sword too. But just swinging it at power and stopping to change direction, I ended up cracking the handle all the way down. I cried. It's a decoration sword, but it was special to me. And for that reason, they didn't use real swords. They didn't use ABS plastic or metal or ivory. Okay, you could find a real sword with ivory, but having it mounted that way meant it wasn't supposed to be used because the ivory will break too. Okay, so if you're looking for that sword for the zombie apocalypse, step number 1, wooden sheath. Step number 2, wooden handle. Okay, and again, this is not a deal killer either, because obviously you can put a handle on a sword that it wasn't made for. It's tough, but several blades came back from World War II that way. The 700-year-old blade that I have at home came back into this country at the end of World War II, and it had one of those crappy gunto scabbards, didn't fit it, and a handle that didn't fit it either. Somebody had stuck that blade in there, and it's mine now. One of 5 made. But we're going to leave the handle off because this gets us into the most important parts of this. Okay, real sword or piece of crap. The next thing you're going to do, and this is where we start getting into terms that sword vendors are going to use that don't actually have legal definitions, so they can't get in trouble for misusing them. But I want you to know what the terms mean, what they're supposed to mean. The first one that is point number 3, full tang. Full tang does not mean they've drank a lot of astronaut orange juice. There's still some people who remember what tang was, but tang refers to the bottom part of the blade that the handle fits over. The Japanese term is nakago. An actual Japanese sword that was made for contact is going to be full tang, and the way you determine that, as opposed to half tang or rat tail tang, some of the other things, full tang means this: if you take the handle off, take your dominant hand and put it on the sword the way it would be if there was a handle there, your support hand should fit on the bottom of the nakago, and at least these 3 fingers should close on steel. It is okay for the bottom finger, the pinky, to rest right here, because it's not really a big part of the grip when you're holding a sword for combat. So it is okay, but your hand should close this way. If only one hand is closing on steel, that's what you call a half tang blade. And if it doesn't make it to 3 fingers, they cheated on the steel and went cheap, and it probably was not meant for actual contact. So if we have anybody that takes a Japanese sword, if your instructor has you hold your bokken with the pinky on the bottom and do a little wavy thing, and there's a lot of instructors who do that, and they say it's traditional. It's not, it's a misapplication of this historical test to see if it's a real blade or not, or if a blade's been damaged and the swordsmith reworks it. It's a test to be able to tell whether it's going to have the right balance and strength to stand up to hitting things. You don't actually use it with your bokken. You want your fingers all on the suka. But to test the blade, it's okay to do this and close your hand on it, and it should fit. And I have large hands. You may have noticed. I'm not a 5'1", 140-pound Asian man. I'm almost 2. So my hands are large, but there's not a huge difference between our hand sizes. Maybe a ½ inch when you add those up. It'll still be a good test for almost everybody to determine. Point number 1, wooden sheath. Point number 2, wooden handle. Point number 3, and this is the first one, that if the sword fails this, you're done. Full tang. If it's a half tang blade, remember, hitting things that are solid, there is shock and vibration that travels down the blade. If you have a wooden handle stuck over this hand is on wood with steel underneath it, and this hand is on wood. When you swing it, where's all the stress? It ends right there, so the stress is in the handle. And when Hanwei Forge first started making blades in China, this is CAS Iberia brings them in. They make arguably the best modern day reproduction blades in the business. It's what our school uses for our students, because not everybody has $7 grand to drop on a Japanese blade. If they did, I would raise my tuition, because I got bills to pay. So they buy these blades. Hanwei Forge, when they started, their flagship sword is called the Shinto Katana. And their generation 1, because it was the first Japanese blade this Chinese sword company was making, they didn't know any better. To save money, they made a half-tang blade. And at the Sakura Festival in Los Angeles, about 15 years ago now, Japanese Sword Group is doing performances outside the big mall they have down there. And they had a row of cutting stands with instructors ready to cut, head instructor giving commands, guy stepped forwards and cut, and 2 of the blades handles snapped. Now luckily, these guys knew what they were doing. Guy held on to the sword, but handle broke, the Ito kind of unraveled, and they're just holding the... And before you think I'm bashing on anybody, number 1, I told you already, Hanwei Forge, that's the blades our students use. Number 2, that martial arts group, that was ours. That was my instructor and his students in LA. Because nobody thought to take the handle off and look. We looked at all the other parts of the sword, and we didn't do it. That's part of where this lecture came from, was us sitting down and trying to figure out what's an easy way to teach our students what to look for in a sword. Because it's devastating to have you find a sword in a garage sale and empty out your bank account to pay $400 for something at a garage sale that was really cool, and you bring it to me to look at and see if it's good for class. And I go, I'm sorry, you can't use this for test cutting. So it's easier to do this, to let me swing a razor sharp piece of steel at you with no handle, and your job is to not flinch. Flinching is okay, but don't flail. There's a difference. Flinching is a retraction, flailing is this, and razor sharp steel and flailing usually leads to little pieces flying. Look, a souvenir from the convention. I think it's his thumb.
Needs to play.
So, step number 1, wooden sheet. Step number 2, wooden handle. Step number 3, full tang. If it fails this test, you're done. Walk away. But this is why you have to make them take the handle off. Okay, most of the time, just tapping and stuff, you can figure out whether the Suka is made out of wood or not. But it is really hard to tell just by tapping it and shaking it a little bit to be able to tell whether it's actually full tang. Okay, because if the handle's made tight and fit, it'll feel roughly the same, but it won't when you start cutting or hitting things. So, full tang. Now that we're here, let's finally, we'll look at the shiny part. Real sword or piece of crap? And here's another buzz term for you. Actual swords are made from high carbon steel. There is actually a legal definition of high carbon steel for the metallurgy group, but the only way to find out whether it actually is high carbon steel by legal definition is to harvest a sample from the blade and then check it. And that does bad things to your sword, to take a divot out of it. So, I'm going to give you an easy way to tell. High carbon steel, whether it is or not, high carbon steel does something that other alloys don't do. High carbon steel oxidizes, which is a fancy way of saying what?
Rusts.
It rusts. Oh, so you're cheating. You didn't actually know this. You just listened before. Oh, wait, actually, I should be happy with that. Somebody paid attention. Oh, high carbon steel oxidizes. Do you see this? This is a paper towel. It's white. And I know at this convention we have a very good idea of white. Racist. And the reason why I'm showing you this is not because I question whether or not you understand what white is, but I want you to see that there's not dirt on this. I'm not playing a parlor trick. I'm not going to get you to look at this end and then switch paper towels. I just want you to see. High carbon steel oxidizes. So when you're looking at the sword blade, ask the sword vendor if you can just wipe the blade down. They will let you do that. In fact, most of them would be pleased because a lot of them don't clean the blades when they get them from their factory, and they're still coated in that thick grease they coat them with in China and to ship them over here because salt air is corrosive, and they don't want the blades to rust. So they'll coat them in this packing grease. So get a clean paper towel. Japanese sword, sharp, not sharp. Put the paper towel over the back of the blade and fold it over. So you use your thumb, your index fingers to kind of pinch the blade. Don't put your fingers on the edge. Japanese swords are sharp. And just wipe the blade down.
Did you find that out the hard way?
But wipe the blade down. Do not stand with your back to the audience and do this. I did that once by accident while I was trying to pick something else up and people started snickering. I'm like, what? And they're like, you look like you're being bad. I'm like, what are you? Oh my God. We're at an anime con. The sad thing is it wasn't a teenager that giggled and pointed that out. It was some 40-year-old guy. Look like you're being bad. You mean like you were last night? So just wipe the blade down. When you're done, take a look at it. High carbon steel oxidizes. It means it's going to have little rust on it. That blade, that's my remounted 1943 World War II blade. I use it every week. Every time it gets taken out of the sheath, I wipe the blade down.
And you get
But
that
high carbon steel oxidizes. So it's going to do this. If a blade does not oxidize, it's not high carbon steel. And that's a couple of our other examples here. And by the way, you can get rice paper Some of the really expensive sword cleaning kits use rice paper. It's really expensive. You don't have to. There are paper towels. Do not get the cheapest ones, and don't get the scented ones. They particle and fall apart. Not that I'm advocating one brand or another, since I'm not endorsed by any of them, but we buy Viva because they're good, thick paper, and they're absorbent. Sound like I am advocating. It's a news panel brought to you by Viva, the River Picker Upper. For your blood and sword cleaning needs. But this is also another World War II blade. This is a World War II naval sword. Naval officers didn't expect to engage in hand-to-hand combat with a sword. And salt air is very corrosive. So what a lot of their officers did is they carried chrome-plated blades because chrome looks really cool. It makes a heck of a bumper on a 57 Chevy. But it was not intended for edge-to-edge sword combat. And chrome is a little different. Even though you can see there's pits and stuff on the blade, if you wipe this blade down vigorously, I didn't turn my back, shut up. If you wipe the blade down, chrome blades don't rust, which is why the naval officers carried them. They were low maintenance, you know, like the girlfriend, if you know. No, girlfriend is the low maintenance. Right, Kristen? You like the glare? I never say those things unless I'm armed, and she's out of reach. The worst part is she's right. So, point number one, wooden sheath. Point number two, wooden handle. Point number three, full tang. Point number four, high carbon steel. Are you with me so far? Pretty simple, right? I told you it would be. Most of the things for this, they're designed to be simple. It's just, if you don't know ahead of time what to look for, you have no idea. I feel sometimes like Sherlock Holmes. Well, he does all these really cool things, and then he has to explain them all. And when he's done explaining all the steps to his logic, like, oh, I thought you did something clever. Because once it's explained, it's not always that complicated. And for being able to tell a real sword or a piece of crap, it's not really that complicated. Now, there are a couple other things, and we'll go into our last point, but I want to show you this example.
Whoa.
Real sword or piece of crap? Guess which one this is? This is a piece of crap. If you hold it, this is ABS plastic. It's only half tang. And obviously this is cheap, crappy steel. But you notice it did rust. So while it passed one of the tests, it didn't pass two of the other ones. This was from a Renaissance festival in Omaha, Nebraska. Our stage setup, we have sword vendors that request to be next to our stage show because we do sword combat and test cutting. That's sacrificing a virgin. And when our show is over, everybody goes right over to the sword vendor to buy swords because they're excited and want to hit people with blades. But one of the sword vendors, he was selling swords out the front of his tent, and out the back is where he just tossed the boxes and stuff. One of his swords just got thrown into the back, brand new, and left. It was clear against the snow fence in the back, and when he packed up, he forgot it. When we were setting up the next year, we found the blade in the weeds. And he's like, it's fun. Look, Dan, a sword. You want to use that for your show? And I went, sure. And he went, wait a minute. Because he knew what I was going to do. He's like, let me have that back. I'm like, nope, you gave it to me. It's mine now. I'm going to use it as an example of what not to buy. Because this is a decoration sword. And now it's not even that. Nobody in their right mind is putting this on their wall to be cool. You would. Look. If somebody attacks me, tetanus! Tetanus! You're in trouble. May you die a slow, lingering death. I'm just the guy to give it to you. So, high carbon steel, but it fails the other tests. We have one last test, because I promised you 5 things. The last thing, now we're going to look at that shiny blade that we just cleaned off. And if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I'm going to reassemble this. Oh, it's not gonna take that long. Da, 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 da. Okay, so, sword's back together. I know that took a little bit longer than 8 seconds to put back together, but I wasn't blindfolded either, so I was working under a handicap. No. But obviously, easy to take apart and put back together. The last thing we're going to look at is the blade itself, and we're going to look at that wavy line. If you know anything at all about Japanese culture, and you're an anime con, you know enough to know this. The swords have a wavy line that run down them. Doesn't matter how crappy the animation is on your show. Somebody showed me a thing on YouTube that had samurai guys, and it looked like they were drawn by the creators of South Park. They walked like this. And the sword was just a blob, but it had a squiggly line down it. And while they were walking, the sword actually walked past the squiggly line and then caught up. But that was cool. I love that sword. That squiggly line is actually the last test on this. In English, the term is temper line. In Japanese, it's hamon. And the reason why it's there is Japanese swordsmiths wanted to make a sword that was really hard along the edge so it would hold its shape, so it didn't dull really quickly. Has anybody got a pocket knife that says made in Pakistan? You put a razor edge on it so it'll actually shave hair off your arm. But after you've opened one cardboard box, what you have is a butter knife, because the edge is just, all right, that's a combination of just low quality steel, but it's also not usually heat treated properly, where the edge comes off too soon. It gets, so to keep a hard edge, the Japanese swordsmiths made a really hard edge, but they wanted the back of the sword to be softer so it would absorb shock when it hit something solid. So when they tempered the steel, after they shaped the blade, you temper the steel. It's where you harden it by heating it up. They put a mixture of ash and clay on the back of the sword and left the edge exposed. Put it back in the forge so it would glow white or orange hot, depending on your school, and you would plunge it into an oil or water bath, and that dropped the temperature drastically, really fast, and that's what tempers the steel. With that clay on the back, though, it cooled at 2 different temperatures. So the edge got really hard and the back stayed soft. If we have anybody who is into metallurgy, there's a Rockwell scale of hardness. It runs from 1 to 70. Diamonds are the hardest substance on earth. They run a 70. The downside to something that's really hard is while it won't bend, it becomes brittle and it'll shatter. And so you don't want the edge to be really hard. And that's why they left the back softer, so it would absorb the shock. On an old Japanese blade, the edge of the sword is going to run between 58 and 62 on that Rockwell scale. Okay, and for anybody counting, I made a Glock reference earlier. If you're into handguns, the slide on your Glock runs about a 64 on that scale. Okay? The back of the sword is going to run a lot softer. It's going to run about 50. Some of the modern blades, since they're not designed to stand up to actual edge to edge, they'll leave it really soft, all the way down to a 35. We don't actually like that, because if you get that big a difference, the blade will have a tendency to crack along the temper line. So you have to watch that. But that's a long explanation that you may not have needed. What's this got to do with the 5th point? The point is this. When you polish a sword, the way you polish it, whether it's machine or by hand, you polish in one direction until all the scratch marks are running the same way, and then you polish at a 90-degree angle for the next direction. The final polish is always lengthwise down the blade, always. And you polish it after it's heat treated. So when you pick up that sword and you want to look at it and go, is this a real temper line or a fake one? Because differential heat treating is expensive, and it's the hardest part of making a sword. Usually if you lose the blade, it's during the heat treating process. So knockoff blades don't have a real temper line, and this is how you tell them apart. You look at the real sword carefully, but when you look at it, you can see grain structure. You can see the lines running lengthwise on the blade from the spine of the blade, the mune, up to that temper line. The scratches all run this way. And from the hamon to the ha, from the temper line to the edge, the scratch marks also run the same way. And that should make sense. You heat treat the blade and then you polish it, and the final one always runs the same way. If you have a sword that has a real temper line, scratch marks always run the same way. If you have a blade that is a decoration, this is where I gotta go fast because I'm suddenly out of time. Obviously this is a decoration blade. Companies will put on fake temper lines with an angle grinder. They'll have them etched on, and to make them more visible so they pop visually, they will run the scratch marks this way on the blade because the contrast sticks out. It's easier, it's more eye-catching. So when you look at this blade, you see the straight lines going this way, and look at the temper line. You see the scratch marks? They actually run at a right angle. So it's easy to tell at a glance that this is a very visible temper line, but it's fake. It's not a real temper line. So this is not the blade to get you through the zombie apocalypse, in case the snakeskin scabbard didn't warn you ahead of time. Okay, so step number 1, wooden sheet. Step number 2, wooden handle. Step number 3, full tang. Step number 4, high carbon steel. Step number 5, real temper line. There you have it. Real sword or piece of crap. Now surviving the zombie apocalypse is up to you. You guys were great. Thank you much for listening to me, and I will see you around the convention.